Again, good morning, everyone. We are starting this 3 days long event. I would like to invite Mr. S. Vijay Kumar, has retired, to be seated in the dais. Mr. Vijay Kumar has a very long, civil service career, and he was the Rural Development Secretary for a long time. And he's presently functioning as the Follow India lead and distinguished fellow interim, 2 hats. I would like to invite Mr. Nandakumar, who is having again multiple hats, a very well-known policy maker in India, and who has occupied many positions, many distinguished positions in administration. Welcome, sir. We have online Morgan Gillespie, the Executive Director of Food and Land Use Coalition. Unfortunately, Morgan could not secure her visa. She has to go back from the airport, but she decided to join online with us. Thanks, Morgan. Can we have Morgan on screen, please? And we have Ajay Veer Jakar, the chairman of Bharat Krishak Samaj, who are our partner in doing this event. And for multiple years, we are, partnering in this sector and doing multiple events and, and organizing events and other, initiatives. So I request Mr. S. Vijay Kumar to start this with his welcome address. Thank you.
Thank you, Hari. Friends, a very warm welcome to you on this nice and sunny October morning. This is a season, we are in the midst of change of seasons, so it's very timely that we are having a summit on agriculture, food, nutrition. As Hari mentioned, this summit is jointly organized by the Food and Land Use Coalition, FOLU, and the Bharat Krishak Samaj, BKS. A word about Bharat Krishak Samaj. BKS is an advocate for farmer prosperity, along with healthy, sustainable, inclusive, and equitable food systems that benefit farmers, consumers, the country, and the planet. It was established as a common meeting ground where anyone interested and everyone interested in strengthening the food systems can meet and put their knowledge, resources, and energy to help those engaged in producing more from their land. BKS makes evidence-based food and agriculture policy recommendations based on farming experience as well as multi-stakeholder research. The Food and Land Use Coalition is a global coalition which brings together diverse actors and stakeholders, including policymakers, farmer organizations, civil society, and the private sector. Its vision is to transform food and land use systems to promote sustainable land use and farming practices, and to produce more nutritious food for all. FOLU works by building consensus around an evidence-based approach through its many strategic partnerships. FOLU works in 7 countries presently through country platforms and hopes to add more. In India, FOLU is a coalition of 4 core partners: the Council of Energy, Environment and Water, popularly known as CEW, present in strength here, I think, yeah. And Revitalizing Rain-Fed Agriculture Network, RRAN, well known for its constituents as well as the network itself, the Energy and Resources Institute, TERI, and the WRI India. All of them need no introduction. All of them have in-depth expertise and of a multidisciplinary nature that enables FOLU and its partners to conduct credible action research. At present, FOLU India and its partners have a footprint in 7 states in India: Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Maharashtra, Uttarakhand, and Odisha. FOLU has also formed an action coalition, FOLU India Crest, CREST stands for Coalition for Responsible Sourcing and Trade of Commodities, since the issues of trade and import and exports are closely related with the issues under consideration. FOLU India's priority has been to convene various actors and stakeholders associated with the different aspects of the agri-value chain to leverage their collective wisdom to enable accelerated transition to sustainable food and land use systems. A word about the summit itself. FOLU India has already held a series of regional consultations prior to this summit. This was organized as part of the Food Systems Economic Commission, FSEC's global report on transformation of food and land use systems. The consultations organized in Chennai, Ahmedabad, and Guwahati with MS Swaminathan Foundation, Center for Environmental Education, and the Balipara Foundation, respectively, have helped gain a better understanding of potential action pathways and networks to support collective action. The Food System Summit is a further step in that direction as a one-of-its-kind national platform to provide much needed space to civil society organizations to interact and showcase their efforts, their learnings, and their experiences for the benefit of all stakeholders. And Bharat Krishak Samaj, as an organization working on the ground closely with farmers, was a natural choice for this partnership. We thank Mr. Ajay Jhakad, Chairman BKS, and his team for partnering with us. Needless to say, the summit is not a standalone activity. The learnings and experience that we gather today and over the next 2 days will help in framing the next initiative, which we intend to call the Food Systems Hub. The hub will provide organized knowledge and enable experience sharing, help build capacity within civil societies towards the intended systemic transformations. So with these words, once again, we welcome you to this summit. We invite you to make most of the FOLU platform and going forward, the Food Systems Hub. I welcome our esteemed guest, Dr. Morgan Gillespie, who unfortunately could not make it today, but we are sure will be with us going forward, not once, but many times, as we go on our journey towards the food systems transformation. And I also welcome Mr. T. Nandakumar, former Agriculture Secretary, and of course, Mr. Ajay Jhakad, Chairman, Bharat Krishak Samaj. Thank you very much, and looking forward to a very fruitful interaction over the next 3 days. Thank you, and I now hand over to Mr. Nandakumar to moderate the discussion.
Thank you, Vijay, and good morning to all of you. Thank you for those words of introduction. In fact, I was expecting the CEO of Niti Aayog to be present here. I had spoken to him even yesterday evening at 5, but you know how PMO calls meetings at the drop of a hat, and once you are in a position in government, I suppose that's your first call of duty. But I'm sure we'll try and get him probably towards the late sessions or have a conversation with him after what we discussed today, and in the next 2 days come to some kind of a conclusion. Now, I would like to welcome you to this summit as active participants, because the way we have designed this conversation is as a neutral platform, and neutrality is very critical for us. Therefore, you will not find any multinational sponsors' names at the backdrop, which you normally find in most big meetings. The neutrality and the impartiality with which you can speak and you can participate, recognizing that the other person can have a counter view, is extremely important in these conversations. Let me also welcome my colleague, Mr. Siraj Hussain. We have ex-secretary. He is a more well-known ex-agriculture secretary. He is active in Delhi much more than me, but we have had long years of association and we have shared many experiences together. I'm sure you will hear from him. Now, let me get into the core of what this summit is all about. As I said, the Bharat Krishak Samaj, and unfortunately or fortunately, I am associated with both BKS and FOLU. Unfortunately, because if anything goes wrong, both of them blame me. And if anything goes right, they take the credit. So that's one of the occupational hazards that I have. But anyway, it's interesting to work with both of them. It brings different perspectives, but a lot of commonality of objectives. But we both agree that the platform for this kind of a discussion has to be neutral. Neutral politically, gender neutral, ideologically neutral. It just brings up experiences, concerns, problems, solutions in a very academic, intellectual, practical kind of a format. In fact, BKS did this, did 5 summits, different formats. We experimented with different types of formats. And we had some very interesting ideas coming up in terms of what could be a food system transformation for India. And of course, the last 2 summits, I think we have POLU and all its 4 brilliant partners, all of them doing excellent work in the field, bringing in a lot of wisdom from the ground to the discussions here. So to us, what is the summit about? It's about bringing voices from the ground, sometimes unheard voices, sometimes feeble voices, to a common platform and see if this can be presented to the policy space and to the policymakers. It's not often that policymakers in Delhi go down to the ground and listen to small experiments, successful or unsuccessful, very often. We are trying to figure out, and I'm sure that we haven't succeeded fully. We have probably left out a large number of them. But within our limitations, we have tried to get people from the ground who have done very interesting work on many parts of the food system, and then bring those thoughts together and see whether A, we can replicate, we can scale up, or we stay where we are, because India is mostly the solutions for India are in local context. They are not one single solution. So it's an attempt to connect, and it is an attempt to bring this mosaic together in some pattern which people can decipher. During the summit, you will hear some very interesting conversations, and it's very important that, unfortunately, there will be 4 pavilions and they will be distributed. More intense discussions will take place. You will hear about number of innovations in rain-fed farming. We still have at least half our area under rain-fed farming. What do these farmers do? Now, rain-fed farming, well, conceptually looks nice, but those farmers in rain-fed areas are the poorest, resource-poor farmers. And they also do not get the subsidies that we give for intense farming. So they are resource poor and they also get deprived from various incentives of the policy. You will also hear about a number of lessons in water conservation, because that's going to be the biggest challenge, in my view, for the decade. And sustainable water management, and how communities have devised methods and models where they conserve and manage the water resource very effectively. These are not typical engineering solutions. These are solutions which have come from the innovative spirit of the community, and they are largely management solutions Of course, there is a bit of engineering there. And this is important from a policy perspective, because when we talk about water conservation and management in policy, you will immediately hear of engineering. And that's important that this conversation takes place. We'll also hear about some farmers' attempts to save their seeds, and especially how do they select those seeds and how do they save them, because seed is an important cost in agriculture today. And it's being driven with a large amount of commercial interest. So it's again, I'm not against seed companies, I'm not against technology, but I think farmer saved seeds is a very important component of our growth. And we are still making baby steps in agroecology and carbon finance, but you will still hear about them. There are more failures than successes, but it's important to know about the failures because we need to learn from those. We will hear a lot about women-led sustainable livelihoods programs. Of course, I come from Kerala, so I always talk about Kudumbashri. But there are other models which are happening elsewhere, even parts of Andhra, parts of Bihar. So you will hear about them because it's, again, extremely important. We talk about gender equality, we talk about gender participation in agriculture, we talk about gender roles in food systems, but it's extremely important to talk about their contribution to livelihoods. You will probably have heard quite a bit about millets, but you will still hear about them. The International Year of Millets is over. And I had argued that we need a decade-long program for millets, not because we need to put it up on the international map. I think we need to put it in our own food map. And that requires much more consistent thinking, much more careful planning, and careful production. You will also hear some very interesting experiments. I think FOLU has piloted those on nutritional improvement of women and children just through kitchen gardens. It's been tried earlier, it failed, but now it seems to have found a new energy into making it count. You'll also hear at some point the famous story of Araku Valley coffee, if you haven't heard that story. Araku Valley is, again, a resource-poor region, not known for its coffee. But today, a consistent, a long-term kind of intervention in terms of growing coffee, testing it, marketing it, branding it, has made it a very well-known brand. It's, again, a very, very interesting story, how communities can capture values in the market if they do it right. You will also hear a bit about the big problem in rural India, which is credit and finance, how innovative solutions are being done by various new agencies other than the government and the banks, the NBFCs and the startups. And you will hear about that, how credit and finance solutions can be met. Two very interesting stories again. I hope this gentleman from fisheries comes here. I don't know how many of you eat shrimps, but anyway, the One Mai shrimp is the big dollar earner for India. It was not originally from the Indian Ocean or from the Bay of Bengal, but it was kind of brought in here for inland fisheries farming. And there is a very, very successful story about how MPDA brought in technology, brought in management practices, and brought in an excellent monitoring system, which increased not only the export earnings of the country, but also the unit value that you realize in the external markets, thereby adding to the profit of the farmers. And last but not the least, you'll also hear something about street foods. Jayahari has managed to get somebody to talk about street foods. Now, street foods we all know are tasty, but are they healthy? Or should they be healthy, or should they do something? Because street foods will form an important component of the poor people's diet. And I think we have not probably given the attention it deserves. So we will also hear about street foods. How can they be healthy and still stay tasty? Now, there is always a question, why do we talk about food systems? Now, India's story of green revolution and self-sufficiency is well known. I don't think I'll go there. But what worries us is probably the level of what is reported as hunger and malnutrition. Of course, there are quarrels on the numbers. I don't want to get in there. I myself have some difficulty with the numbers that are published by the WFP and company, and I have written to them about why I disagree. So therefore, it's not just that I disagree, but that's not the question. We have a problem. We have a problem of hungry people, and we have a problem of malnutrition. Now, you say less, more, that's leave it aside. How do we address that question? Or how have we addressed that question? We can continue the same path, produce more, use more inputs, but is it going to be sustainable? If it's not going to be sustainable, what do we do? I think that is where the real question, if water gets depleted in rice growing areas, if soil moisture becomes a problem, if soil health becomes a problem, what are we going to do? Now, add climate change to this, and I think we have a challenge looking at us in the next decade. So ignoring this would be a real problem, and that's the reason why we need to start looking at food systems. And quite often people have told me food system is a European concept, and therefore we shouldn't even be looking at it. I do agree that we don't have to borrow the entire copybook food system experiments in Europe, but I think we need to have our own systems thinking. It could be very special to India. It could be very relevant to the considerations that we have, but I think we need systems thinking. Now, our interventions in food and nutrition has been basically a public distribution system based on procurement, a midday meal scheme which is running reasonably well, and the ICDS program, which has now become the Poshan program, which has added many other things, including health and drinking water and various other things to its kitty. So the Poshan tracker now has much more data than what it was on the ICDS, but there's still 3 centrally driven, centrally monitored, and probably centrally funded programs. There's not much local innovation. So is that a question that we need to ask? That is there, if there is a connect between sustainable production of food and nutrition, is that centralized kind of a system a solution, or is it going to create more problems? I'm not going to answer that question, but I'm going to leave it at that. But when you look at the growth in agriculture, you will find that dairy, poultry, fisheries, fruits and vegetables have grown much more than cereals. And they have responded to the demands of the market, which is good. This responds also to the protein requirement of the people. The pulses production has also grown post 2010 with larger number of interventions. But again, pulses is a rain-fed crop, so we have that kind of an issue there. What do we do with that? Now, I recently read a statement from Bill Gates Foundation's chairman, Mr. Gates, that if we increase dairy production, then part of the undernutrition problem will be solved very quickly. I mean, that's something that I saw in a press release. Now, India currently has reasonably high per capita production of milk, but has it really solved our undernutrition problem? A question that we need to ask. Now, is that something combined with our growth in poultry. I know I'm getting into a little bit of difficult territory when I talk about eggs and poultry in midday meals, because there is vegetarian versus non-vegetarian kind of an issue. But if we have a growth in fruits, vegetables, milk, and poultry, should we not be addressing the malnutrition issue a little more effectively at the local level? I mean, this is a question again for the policy to probably look at in the long run. Now, I also see a new problem in agriculture, which is that, traditionally our agriculture has been providing our food, feed, and fiber. Feed for animals and poultry, food for human beings, and of course, jute and textile, cotton, and various other fibers. We have added now fuel. We have added ethanol, grain-based ethanol. I would, as a former food secretary who had to struggle with food shortages, raise some questions on the advisability of setting targets for grain-based ethanol. And that is a question. If it is rice, then we are, I don't know where we are getting into a global situation in terms of WTO rice exports, etc., or an internal situation of rice prices. Where are we getting into? If we are talking about maize, then are we really depriving our poultry and our dairy the inputs they need to provide the protein to the people? So this is something that I would leave it as a question. Probably at the end of 3 days, we would have some answers or some leading replies somewhere. And we also know that because of our pressure on water and land, we are slowly shifting to natural farming methods. If not on a large scale, of course, we will not do what Sri Lanka did. I'm sure about that. But the time has come to consciously move towards less input farming, less water use farming, and then move towards a natural farming kind of situation. Not exactly the theoretical and the Puritan definition of natural farming, but I think a case for reducing many of these inputs do exist. But do all this, and if the farmer's income doesn't go up, where does agriculture go? And this question somewhere has to pop up, because 50% of the people on about roughly 16, 17%, of course, COVID times, they'll say 18% of GDP, is not sustainable from an economic perspective. So how do we look at their incomes is the big question. And if their incomes don't go up, can we talk about undernutrition in rural India? This is something that I think we need to talk about. Now, the new kind of thinking that seems to be appearing on the horizon is what's called a planet-friendly diet. Now, you will hear a lot about this, about planet-friendly diet. How much land goes into grazing for producing beef or meat or whatever. How much of the grains are fed. What is the conversion ratio? That's a famous kind of a language that economists use to produce 1 kilo of whatever protein that you use. Should plant-based proteins be? Of course, for India, even non-vegetarians don't that kind of volume of meat. So it's a different story in India altogether. But even then, I think it's important that we look at our own diets. And I mean, in fact, sometimes I ask this question, if all of us eat the same kind of burgers and fries like the Americans, I don't think we will ever be food secure. So that's the question, that the Western diets really do not suit us at all. I mean, it doesn't suit us as human beings. It doesn't suit us as part of the planet. But can we shift to healthier millets? I mentioned healthier meals and healthier food. Unfortunately, we don't have enough millets. We have forgotten some of them. How do we shift our own diets to healthier food? And more importantly, how do we reduce the food loss and waste? There are numbers on food loss and waste. Some are lost in the farm, some are lost in the warehouse, and some are lost on the plate. So altogether, I would reckon that about 1/3 of the food we produce is wasted. And how do we sort of look at that as a conscious civil society movement? And what do we do about that? So at the end of 3 days, can we look at the beginnings of the elements of an Indian food system or a food system approach? How do we, I know that in a year or two or in 1 or 2 summits, if we are attempting to create a food system, that will be a totally futile endeavor. But at least some key elements of a food system that finally will fall into place in the end. Can we define those from the experiences from the ground up? Because as I said in the beginning, this is a ground up summit. It's not, I mean, in fact, I think after 1 or 2 of these speeches, most of you will be sharing your experiences of what you learned, what you did, what worked, what didn't work. So how do we put these together? And we do recognize, as we did in the previous food summit, that the solutions for India are local. And how does one allow local initiatives and local incentivization to take place within a policy framework without losing much of the food security and nutrition issues? So what we would expect to do at the end of the 3 days is to produce something that may not be complete, but that's worth showing to the policymakers and to the world. These are, yes, experiments. These are, yes, local. Some may be replicable, some may be scalable, some may not. But I think it's time to show them up and say, okay, we have a solution to some of these problems, howsoever local they may be, howsoever small they may be, but they are solutions worth looking at. So I hope all of you will have a very productive time, participate, raise questions. And as I said, you have a right to disagree with everything that I said or something that I said, but please recognize that I also have the same right as you to disagree. And ultimately, it is the cohesion of some of these ideas that what works will become part of the policy input. So thank you very much. May I now invite Morgan Gillespie, who unfortunately couldn't be here for reasons beyond her control, to address the gathering. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope that you can hear me well. And as Hari mentioned at the start, I am so sorry that I am not able to be there in person today, despite 3 efforts. The gods went against me. My name is Morgan Gillespie. I'm the executive director of the Food and Land Use Coalition, and it's a great honor to speak to you today to discuss a topic of profound importance, and that is the transformation of food systems globally and in India. As Vijay said, we are here to kick off this 3-day conference, and I think in doing so, it's important for us to reflect on where we've come from, on what we've achieved, as well as this critical path ahead of us. Before I start, I do want to thank our partners, WRI India, Terry, CEEW, RRAN. I want to welcome and thank the ex-Agricultural Secretary, Siraj Hussain, for joining us today. And I want to echo some of the comments you've just heard, that this 3 days is an opportunity to sit together, to be together, to listen to each other, and to co-create the solutions that the world so desperately needs. Now, food systems, in my opinion, has always been the foundation of human society. We have always produced, traded, marketed food. We've always needed to transport food, and we've always needed to eat food to nourish ourselves. Understanding our food systems is key to addressing both local and now global challenges in sustainability, in health, but importantly, in equity. Now, over the last few decades, a deeper realization has emerged, and that is that food systems are not just about production and consumption, but they are themselves complex. They're interconnected webs that link health, nutrition, climate change, biodiversity, and again, importantly, economic development. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Today, the need to transform food systems is urgent. The growing recognition of challenges from hunger and malnutrition to environmental degradation to social inequality demands more than just incremental change. And this is really where the idea of food systems transformation was born, with this focus on creating systemic, inclusive, and sustainable solutions. Now, we know that agriculture and food consumption are responsible for at least 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions. We know that farming practices are contributing to deforestation, are degrading our valuable soils, are driving biodiversity loss, and we know that inefficient supply chains is leading to substantial food waste. This unsustainable approach is threatening our planet's capacity to sustain future generations, and this just reinforces the need for comprehensive change. We just heard comments about health and nutrition, and the world is facing this dual burden of malnutrition on one hand and obesity on the other hand. Nearly 2.4 billion people worldwide, 2.4 billion, it's almost a quarter of the world's population, lack access to nutritious, safe, and sufficient food. And simultaneously, we have more than 670 million adults who are classified as obese, a problem driven by unhealthy, predominantly Western diets. And the health crisis is closely intertwined with livelihoods. Smallholder farmers who form the backbone of food production in many regions are often living in poverty, and many continue to struggle to earn a living wage. Without some radical transformation, our current food system risks deepening these inequalities even further. Now, India has experienced a profound evolution in its approach to food system, and this gives me great hope because if we've done it once, we can do it again. I'm not going to go into detail of the Green Revolution of the 1960s, but it was a significant step in ensuring food security for millions. India's efforts to adopt agroecological approaches, reduce food loss, strengthen value chains are positive signs of the potential for further transformation. There's a number of existing programs, such as the National Food Security Mission, that are steps in the right direction, but clearly more needs to be done. And that's why FOLU and BKS have hosted the summit today, so that we can support inclusive growth. Now, India's challenges are particularly acute, as are many of the challenges of many of the other countries that FOLU works in. But agriculture in India contributes to around 18% of the country's total GHG emissions, largely from rice cultivation, livestock farming, and fertilizer use. And despite being one of the world's largest food producers, India loses or wastes 40% of this food due to supply chain inefficiencies, and this exacerbates food insecurity as well as environmental degradation. Now, these unsustainable practices are straining India's natural resources and threaten future food security. Now, what's been happening globally? Well, the call for food systems transformation has intensified. And that, I think, is a really positive thing. We at FOLU really recognize the critical role that the UN has played in helping to elevate food systems internationally. In fact, the United Nations has been at the forefront of advancing global food systems transformation, and in 2021 hosted the UN Food Systems Summit. Now, this was led by Dr. Agnes Kalibata, the president of AGRA, and AGRA is one of FOLU's partners. And through this process, really convened stakeholders from government, from civil society, from the private sector to try to chart a course towards sustainable food systems by 2030. Now, India, with its vast and complex agricultural landscape, was a key participant in this summit, emphasizing its unique challenges and opportunities. Now, that UN Food Systems Summit was the first step in 2021, and last year we had a further some might call it leap forward. At COP28 last year, 160 heads of state signed the UAE Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture, Resilient Food Systems, and Climate Action. Now, adopted, as I said, at COP28, this declaration underlined the critical need to integrate sustainable agriculture into climate action. It called for collective efforts to mitigate the environmental impacts of our food systems, particularly in vulnerable regions, while also ensuring that agriculture remains resilient in the face of climate shocks. This declaration, a world first, a first of its kind, recognizes that agriculture and food systems are both significant contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. And if we want to achieve the Paris Agreement, we have to recognize them as solutions to climate change. This declaration goes further. It emphasizes the need for scalable, climate-smart agricultural practices that can enhance productivity without degrading ecosystems. It calls for reducing food loss and food waste, strengthening value chains, and investing in innovation and technology to build these food systems that are sustainable, inclusive, and equitable. And if the UAE Declaration helped to raise the floor on action, FOLU was incredibly proud to help develop and launch a high ambition coalition that we believe is helping to raise the ceiling. The Alliance of Champions of Food Systems Transformation, or the ACF, as we like to call it, is a coalition of pioneering countries committed to transforming food systems domestically and internationally. As I said, they were formed as a key outcome of COP28. It was launched with support of the COP28 presidency, and the ACF brings together nations, including Brazil, Norway, and Sierra Leone, who are the co-chairs of this coalition, supported by Cambodia and Rwanda. And the aim of these countries is to build national food systems that are sustainable and adaptable, but importantly, that are serving a model for other countries. Now, the Alliance really believes on a systems-based approach, and in doing so, these countries have committed to acting across 10 priority areas at the same time. This includes increasing the affordability of nutritious food. It includes, of course, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It includes improving livelihoods, protecting nature, and scaling up of sustainable agricultural practices. But it also includes elements of freshwater security, of energy transformation, recognizing that food systems can't progress without all elements of the system progressing together. Now, the mechanism the ACF countries are using to display progress is by integrating food systems transformation into their nationally determined contributions, their NDCs, or their national adaptation plans, their NAPs, by 2025. Many of us will probably go from India to Cali, where the Biodiversity COP is being held over the next 2 weeks, to hear if these countries have successfully integrated food systems into their NBSAPs. And we as FOLU, as a global coalition, are incredibly proud to continue to advocate for these efforts to elevate the need, the implementation, and the action of food systems transformation globally and domestically. Now, Vijay sort of started off by sharing a little bit about FOLU. We are a global coalition. We try our best to bring together diverse actors from businesses to policymakers, including farmers and civil society. Our mission is really to galvanize diverse leadership. We recognize that a one-size-fits-all solution is not going to solve the wicked problems that food systems is showing us today. And through those diverse leadership, to elevate the expertise and the solutions that are needed for rapid and transformative change. Now, we believe that we have been instrumental in some small way into driving evidence-based policy advocacy and informing the strategic partnerships that we believe are needed to push this agenda forward. Through our global presence, we try to influence decision makers at multiple levels, whether through national policies or through collaborations with international organizations such as the UN or the World Bank, or through our work with the climate COPs or the biodiversity COPs. And in India, FOLU India, plays a critical role in driving whole system transformation. India, as both a major food producer and consumer, holds this unique responsibility. And Folu India works hard to foster innovative solutions that can promote sustainable agriculture, that can build climate resilience, and again, to focus on improving livelihoods. Folu India really seeks to create a food systems that not only feeds people, because feeding people is no longer enough, but to nourish them, to nourish people through food systems that can protect the planet. India's food system transformation is more than improving agricultural productivity. It's about creating a system that works for everyone, especially the most vulnerable. And Folu India, with its partners, is uniquely positioned to lead this change by aligning its efforts with national priorities, by continuing to engage with diverse stakeholders, and as we've heard before, in this neutral setting, to help to foster partnerships that can create the world that we want to live in. So, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, as you embark on the next 3 days of discussion, of debate, of listening and learning, as we embark on this journey together, we must recognize that food systems transformation is not optional. It is essential. And the choices that we make now will shape the health of our people, of our planet, both today and for generations to come. So if I ask you to do anything, can we please commit ourselves to this transformation? Let us commit ourselves to creating food systems that are equitable, sustainable, and resilient for India and for the world. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Morgan. I think that message is well received. Food system transformation is not optional, but almost mandatory at this point of time. Now, can I turn to Ajay Jakhar, the veteran of all food summits, for his words.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's working. I thank everyone for taking time out from their busy lives to join each other, not only us, but to join each other in this Food Systems Summit. I will be mercifully brief. I will not take too much time because everyone's here to get along with the program. This is the 6th annual event that Bharat Krishak Samaj is holding this time in partnership with FOLU, centered around food systems. The narrative has since caught on in the country. When we initially sought to develop an idea of a systems thinking in the food space in India, and possibly even systems thinking for the first time, we encountered immense skepticism from those within and outside the government. The skepticism outside the government has much reduced. The skepticism within the government still stays. And that's a fact. And it stays because the government finds it very complex of how to go about it. Not only is a food systems as strong as the weakest link in the chain, but also one doesn't rise to the level that one wishes to rise to, but falls to the level of the systems they operate in. And that is where I think the thinking and the differences actually come up. We have experienced that the system will always push back against an agenda that includes policies such as accountability, transparency, you could also say beneficiary stakeholder assessments, restructuring departments, ministries, support systems, and subsidies. The system will always push back. And I'll come to the reason of why this happens. After inculcating the idea of systems thinking, we as an organization, Bharat Krishak Samaj, I speak for myself now and our organization, we are now seeking to inculcate the idea of changing mindsets and talking on the value of building trust. If you look at the farm laws that you could say farm laws that never came through, and thankfully so, the problem arose because there was a huge trust deficit between the farming community and those that were trying to reform the systems. And so as an organization, we think it is time to inculcate the idea that building trust itself is an activity. It is not a subset of activities that comes out because you do something. It itself is an activity which we have been focusing on. It is critical for any transformation. Then there is a underestimation of the time it will require to build trust. We never even think about building trust. But if you were to build trust, we always, and when I say we, means all organizations, government, civil society, whoever's thinking about it, normally underestimates the time it will require to build trust. And so we should also be focusing on building trust. It is not a consequence of activities, but it is an activity in itself. Leadership at the national and subnational level is also critical. This is so because markets don't always work. And this is very important, Nankumarji. Power exists in the political economy and governments, and the governments must intervene in a systematic way to protect the interests of their citizens, not just consumers, because this is something that is important. Making one thing better will tend to make other things worse. And the leadership is a matter of choosing which problems to have. It is not a matter of the leadership does not have to think about what problems to solve, I think so. The leadership has to think about what problems to retain, because you're not going to be able to solve all problems. And such thinking requires a systems approach. With my experience, I have no hesitation in saying that this thinking is lacking not only at the national level, but it is also lacking at the subnational level in organizations which are to advise the government at the national level, and organizations which are advising state governments. And that includes, as Ashok Gulati put it in his article yesterday, roadside consultancy companies, or it includes multinational consultancy firms. I think so it is lacking at all places. The other interesting aspect that we found in our journey is that organizations do not easily share contact details or resource people. And Jayari ji is on board on this. We have, as Bharat Krishak Samaj, in every meeting said that we will foster the spirit of collective wisdom, generating trust and transparency by sharing email addresses of all participants with other participants in the event. And if because it's a privacy issue, if somebody does not want the addresses and contact details shared with the other participants, I would suggest that you have around 20 days to send us a mail that you do not want your contact details shared. We will not share it thereafter. I think so, Vijay Kumarji, with your permission, next month we should be sharing contact details so everybody can build their own networks. Nobody should have ownership of a network. Normally we see is that people do not want to share concerns. The other interesting part is that we've had 3 economists who've got a Nobel Prize telling us that nations prosper because institutions are there. But I think it is much more than that. I think it is much more than that. We need not only nations prosper because institutions are there, but nations also prosper because of the political economies that exist, and how multilateral organizations operate. I really think multilateral organizations, including the United Nations and other organizations, need to reassess their objectives like sustainable development goals, because as a farmers organization, we find that not one of the sustainable goal development objectives is going to be met by 2030. So we really need a bottom-up approach, not only as a farmers organization, not only as FOLU, but we need a bottom-up approach going right from the farmers field, right from the beneficiaries field, right up to the United Nations. And I think that's the message I would want to leave before we go into 3 days of enlightening learning experience, making networks, connecting with each other. And lastly, I'm very thankful for FOLU for this fruitful relationship that we have built with FOLU. I thank Vijay Kumarji's leadership. I thank Jayari's leadership in helping come to this point that we are here today for this 3 days of experience. I thank, as always, Nand Kumarji for mentoring me since I joined with Bharat Krishak Samaj. And I'm so happy and so proud to say that we have Siraj Hussain Saab with us today, who has constantly supported not only Bharat Krishak Samaj, but me personally in my journey that we are all here today. Thank you so much for coming. And we look forward to not only learning from each other, but interacting, building networks, and inculcating ideas and having a fruitful discussion. That's how the program is. And the program is not by Chatham House rules. I think that was decided that unlike other Bharat Krishak Samaj programs, these programs are not by Chatham House rules. And people are ready to take ideas from each other and express them freely where they want by quoting people. Thank you so much for coming here with us. Thank you for joining, and hope to learn from all of you and keep interacting over 3 days. Thank you so much.